Okay, we'll get started. Badram Karanevihi Shrunyama Devaha Badram Pashyema Akshabihi Yajatraha Sthirairangair Tushtuvam Sastanubihi Vyashema Devahitan Yadayuhu Swastinaha Indro Vridra Shravaha Swastinaha Pusha Vishwavedaha Swastinaha Tarksho Arishtanemihi Swastino Brihaspati Dadatu यो अन्तः प्रविश्य मम वाच इमां प्रक्षुप्तां सञ्जीवयति अखिलशक्तिधरस्वदाम्ना अन्यांश्च हस्तचरणश्रवणत्वगादीन् प्राणान् नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यं लसतु श्रीमदानन्दतीर्थेन्दुर्नो हृदम्बरे यद्वचश्चन्द्रिका स्वान्तसन्तापं विनिकृन्तति पदवाक्यप्रमाणज्ञान् प्रणम्य शिरसा गुरून् व्याकरिष्ये यथा बोधं विष्णुतत्त्वविनिर्णयम्. So good afternoon, everyone. We are making very good progress with regards to the itinerary for the next 12 to 18 months. As you know, we are alternating between Chandogya Upanishad, Gita Chinthana, and revision to continue with our syllabus of study of Vedas and Vedanta. So in that sequence of events, this week we have our next session of Gita Chintana, and we are focusing on chapter 2, being a slightly bigger chapter. It is divided into part A and part B. So today is part A of chapter 2, and this session is going to be truly international. We got Harish from New Jersey in the USA, who is going to be coordinating the event, and we have participants from England and from Dubai contributing to today's program. So I would kindly request all of you to participate in these events. This is made for us, by us, to all of us. So over to Harish to take us through chapter 2, part A's journey, please. Harish, thank you very much.
Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramaddanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagatgurum. Thank you, Madhuji and Hari Om, dear friends, and welcome to our continuing session on Bhagavad Gita today. As Madhu mentioned, we will be covering the first half of chapter 2, Sankhya Yoga. I'm joined here by Binaji, Pratibhaji, and Deval. And I also wanted to mention that we have a special guest, Shreya, who is Pratibha's daughter, will be joining to chant some verses. So welcome, Shreya. Look forward to hearing your chants as well. So I'll give me a minute while I share my screen, and we can get started. Are you able to see?
Okay.
Okay, perfect. All right. So so here's the outline of how we'll cover this. I'll provide a very brief introduction of Sankhya Yoga, and then we'll spend a majority of the time really talking through the shlokas. There's been 4 shlokas that has been selected by Binaji, and Pratibhaji will walk through that. We'll spend some time and open it up for discussion with the broader group. And then we'll make sure that we leave enough time at the end for the quiz, because while the quiz is interactive and is meant to engage, there's a fair bit of discussion that's also involved in the quiz that Devalji will facilitate. So we'll make sure that we run through it fairly quickly, so we give adequate time for the quiz. So I'll get started with the brief introduction. Give me just 1 second. Right. All right. So, all right. So with Sankhya Yoga, so the first thing we'll talk about is what is Sankhya. There's a fair bit of definition on the word Sankhya, and Sankhya also happens to be one of the Astika schools of philosophy. But in this context, Sankhya is something that's very specific. So we'll talk through that. What are some of the key teachings that are discussed as part of the Sankhya Yoga? In this chapter, we'll talk to that, and maybe we'll do a broad brush of some of the popular shlokas before we dive into the 4 shlokas that are selected. So, based on many descriptions of Sankhya Yoga that we've seen, the one definition that really made it clear and resonated with me was that it's the knowledge that reveals the nature of soul and the nature of reality. And as I mentioned before, and just as a spoiler, in one of the quiz, there's going to be a question on Sankhya with with all the different definitions that are there and what it really means. But this is one of the meanings that that makes it very clear, and is also very contextual if you look at how the what the content of the chapter really is. So the key teachings that that's covered as part of the Sankhya Yoga is we spend quite a bit of shlokas on the eternity of the soul. There is the concept of how the sense perception is very transient. There's some introduction of Karma Yoga and how we have to work with detachment. And then as we start to get into the second half of the chapter, there's concepts of Swadharma and how Arjuna needs to follow his Swadharma. And towards the end, it talks about the qualities of Sthita Prajna. So someone who is established in consciousness, what are some of his attributes, what are some of his qualities? So those things are discussed towards the end of the chapter. So given that we are focused more on the first half of this, our focus is going to be on the eternity of the soul and some of the transient nature of sense perception. So we'll talk to some of those concepts and then we'll move on. So in terms of the popular shlokas, many of you have may have heard some of this. So one of the first one is the Natve Vaham Jatunasam Natvam Neme Chanadipa. So this talks about how there was never a time when Krishna said that I did not exist, or Arjuna didn't exist, or any of these kings and the warriors that you see on the field did not exist. And similarly, in future, they will continue to exist. So this really gets to the core of how the soul is truly eternal. And then in the commentary section, Sri Madhvacharya also talks about how not only is it eternal, but it's also subservient to the Lord. So that's the one popular shloka. The other one is about the Matra Spashastu Kaunteya Shitoshna Sukha Dukkadaha Agama Payano Nitya Samsitakshasva Bharata. So this is where it really talks about how some of our sense perceptions are not permanent, and just like how winter comes and goes, we have to think about how we can transcend the sense perception and really get into the core of your being. So again, very important concept that is really spoken about quite a bit in this chapter. And then finally, the one that we will delve into today is the Najayate Mriyate Va Kadachi Nayam Bhutva Bhavitana Vana Bhuyaha. And this is how the soul is never born and does not ever die. And that even when the body finally dies, the soul continues to live on. So again, there's going to be a lot more conversation on this particular shloka by Pratibhaji. But I just wanted to give a high-level overview of the various concepts that's discussed in this chapter before we dive into that. So so that's the brief intro. We'll quickly get into the shlokas. But before I do that, I just wanted to open up for anybody listening in. Is there anything at a high level, conceptual level that you think was missed or we should include? I don't know, Madhu or Sudarshan or others have any thoughts, or should we just dive in?
No. Harish, yeah, Sudarshan, go on.
No, Harish, everything looks perfect and the presentation is brilliant. It's really very attractive. Thanks.
Oh, sure.
So Harish, I was just going to nip in very briefly about the Sankhya Yoga that you briefly mentioned, what it actually means. So actually there is a lot of misunderstanding as to what the chapter actually means, and thanks for bringing it forwards so that all of us can actually realize, as we have done in so many classes, every word in the Gita, of course, you need to break open to understand what the meaning of that is. And that's how we have always read over the last 18 months. So similarly, when you look at Sankhya, it literally means Samyak. Samyak Khyati equals Sankhya. It is a shortened version of Samyak and Khyati. Samyak means correct. Khyati means knowledge. Correct knowledge is Sankhya. Yoga means Upaya. It's not sitting and bending your parts of your body. It is Upaya. So the Upaya, the means of having the right knowledge, is the exact meaning of Sankhya Yoga. It has got nothing to do with Patanjali Yoga or Kapila Sankhya. And as you said, it is Nastika. So I just wanted to add on to that. Thank you, Harish.
All right, perfect. All right, so with this, I will be transitioning it over to Veena ji. So Shloka commentary and discussion. So as I mentioned, we'll talk about a couple of ones that Veena will discuss, and then Pratibha ji will discuss two more. And welcome Shreya as well for the Shloka chanting. And with that, we'll go to Shloka number 3 in this chapter. Over to you, Veena. Actually, first I'll let Shreya chanted, and then over to you, Veena.
Yeah, I think I'll first go with the context and then Shreya will chant the shloka. So Krishna has been patiently listening to Arjuna's arguments as to why war should not be fought. We have seen this beautifully summarized during our Gita Chinthana on first chapter. And just now Harishji mentioned the second chapter is indeed Krishna's response. Ever smiling Krishna begins his response by actually scolding Arjuna with piercing words. He tells Arjuna that his thoughts are not worthy of jnanis, anarya, and do not lead to higher abodes, aswargyam, and indeed are disgraceful, akirtikaram. Krishna further wonders why Arjuna is confused at this crucial moment. Then he says,
Klaibyam masmagama partha naitatvai upapadyate kshudram hridayador balyam tyaktvotishta parantapa. Meaning, O Partha, it does not befit you to yield to this unmanliness. Give up such petty weakness of the heart and arise, O vanquisher of enemies.
Klaibyam. The use of the word klaibyam here perhaps to remind Arjuna that he had played the role of Brahannala during Ajnatavasa. But that was temporary role that Arjuna had to play and discard that immediately. Similarly, Arjuna is now under the momentary influence of delusion. He needs to discard this and he needs to be his own true self, that is, the vanquisher of enemies, Parantapa. The commentators bring up some very interesting points. Krishna is asking Arjuna to give up petty weakness and calling his actions as unmanly. Does this mean Arjuna is weak or a coward? Krishna clarifies, saying that Arjuna is under the influence of momentary delusion. He is not inherently weak or a coward. Krishna reminds Arjuna of his true nature by calling him Parantapa. Another important aspect is Krishna has totally ignored all of Arjuna's questions. Does this mean Arjuna was not asking the right questions? Perhaps. Krishna is indicating that there are much more relevant, deeper, and significant questions to be answered. Another point the commentators bring up is Krishna was right in trying to convince Arjuna to fight the war, or is the war justified? Krishna's message seems to be very clear. One has to perform one's duties as per one's dharma, be it war or be it peace. As to why Krishna addresses Arjuna as Partha is also discussed by commentators. This relates to an incident that occurred once the peace process was broken. Kunti, despite not seeing her sons for 13 long years and was ever longing to see them, sends a message through Krishna. Kunti asks Krishna to remind her sons of the great mother Vidula. Vidula's son, Sanjaya, had to occupy the throne at a very young age because of his father's death. Seeing this as an opportunity, the neighboring king, Sindhudesha king, invades Saurava's kingdom, Savira. Invades Sanjaya's kingdom, Savira. Initially, Sanjaya is terrified, but Vidula urges him to lead the army and fight. The Sindhu king mounted a fierce attack. Shaken by this attack, Sanjaya returns to the fort wounded. Vidula, by seeing Sanjaya returning to the fort, orders to shut the fort doors. She tells Sanjaya, "Abandon your fear. Rise, O coward." She tells him, "You have only two options. Either win and return or die fighting." Inspired by Vidula's words, Sanjaya returns to the battlefield and leads his men to victory. So Krishna here, by addressing Arjuna as Partha, seems reminding Arjuna of the Kunti's message that he has to rise and fight. Back to Harish.
All right, thank you, Vinodji. I think particularly your story on Vidula was interesting. I mean, that's actually it was a story in the Mahabharata that I was not aware of. But as we summarize some of the questions that you have posed, right? I mean, is Arjuna weak or coward, or is it right for Krishna to have encouraged Arjuna to fight a war? And what's the relevance of calling Arjuna Partha? I think many of these things, you're nicely expressed. So just wanted to open it up to see if there was any other thoughts from the group on any of these points of discussion. Okay. So if there aren't any things, we can maybe move on to the next.
Yeah. So I'm kind of prompted to nip in here, if that's all right.
Yes, please do.
I think you can also pick any of us. Just put them in the spot to respond as well. So
okay.
Don't make it all too voluntary. Make it dictatorial also, I would suggest. So anyway, I was just going to pick up the third one. Is it right of Krishna to have encouraged Arjuna to fight a war? Yeah, so I think this is another common question that's asked. If non-violence is such an exalted virtue and it's such an important virtue, why did Krishna prompt Arjuna to fight and kill people? Is that not an act of violence when non-violence has been so well discussed in Gita itself and elsewhere? So the answer to that is, with all the logic that our friend Arjuna had given, perceived logic of why a war should not be waged in the first chapter, with all the reasons why women, kula, gotra, everything gets degraded. When he was saying that, what he had forgotten was two things. One, if the war was not waged, then all those things were definitely going to happen, because Duryodhana is going to come on to the throne. And the evil Duryodhana was going to ensure that all the bad things that Arjuna had listed was going to happen 10 times more if the war had not happened and Arjuna had surrendered. Yeah. So that was a prime reason that a war had to be waged, to establish that dharma, so that things don't happen in society, because Duryodhana is very capable of doing that. The other one I was going to say is, this war happened only after all options were actually exhausted. It's not that at the throw of a hat, a war was declared. Every option was exhausted before a war was going to happen. So every option was exhausted, but at the same time, if Duryodhana was made king, all the bad things that Arjuna had listed in chapter 1 was going to happen 10 times more. So this is a unique, I wouldn't say unique, this is a practical logic of Krishna here about violence and also of establishing dharma. And what he says is, for violence, ahimsa from Krishna's perspective is a very relative term. It's very relative for Arjuna what ahimsa is. It's like, for example, there is a village with 100 cows, and there is a wild, and the village is next to a jungle, and a wild animal comes and kills those 100 cows regularly. It is okay to capture that wild animal, yeah, and remove it from the scene. And that violence to that wild animal is justified there, so that 100 cows are rescued. So that is the logic of ahimsa as per Bhagavad Gita, and I just wanted to express that and hope that was interesting. Thanks, Harish.
Yeah, and the other thing that also comes to mind is, although it's you could think that he's a warmonger, but even before Bhagavad Gita part of it, during Mahabharata, Krishna does go to Hastinapur and try to be the peacemaker. So he's played that part of being the peacemaker, despite being discouraged by many elders from doing that. He did that. So that's also, I think, an important point. It's good context before this type of a call to fight.
Yeah.
Madhu, thank you, and Harish, thank you, and Veena also, thank you. I want to make a point as well. I mean, albeit controversial as usual. This is the same situation we are in now. There's so much of talk about non-violence and everything, and so there is so much of threat to our dharma, all over the world, and particularly in India, with from so many forces. So the issue is whether we take it on and then we fight it. I mean, when we say fight it, it doesn't mean we say fight it violently. It's even it could be non-violent, but also whatever is needed. The question then comes is we're not saying violently. We're not at all saying violently. We are saying like not like the wars in those days. We are saying this is an issue. It's your duty. You need to take it on, each and every one of us, to do something about it. Okay, whether it's about raising the awareness and sort of saying to people we're not happy with this, or legally civilized everything. But the issue is, many of the times we see there is an apathy from our Hindus, very similar to what Arjuna had. Like, whether should I fight, because this will create problems between the relationship between the Hindus and the non-Hindus, within even in the Indian context. So this sort of thing. But like as Madhu said, if you don't do this, it's going to be anyway. Even if you don't raise this issue, we are going to end up in a way like the Duryodhana. I compare them to Duryodhana. It's not all non-Hindus, the ones who are sort of waging the war on Hinduism and Dharma. So they are like, they are going to do it anyway. So if you don't do anything, so they are going to create problems. They are going to create misunderstanding between Hindus and the non-Hindus. They are going to create the problem anyway. So you're not going to be on the wrong side just because you raise these issues, even if it creates some issues. So it's very relevant for the current context. I know some of you may not agree with this, may not be, maybe even shocked to hear this, but very, very relevant. So for the current context, it's not that we are sitting and reading a history, or we are reading for our own comfort something from the past, or just spending our we done our all the bits, we are in our sort of varnashrama time, sorry, vanaprastha time, we are doing this. It's not like that. So it's something very relevant, something we have to tell our youngsters, something we have to tell each and every one of us, because it's extremely, it's the same message as whatever, so the alternate is not going to be, alternate is going to be worse. At least we start reacting, start fighting this in a very non-violent way. At least we can achieve something. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks Sudarshan. I know Pragnesh, you had your hand up. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, it was a very worldly example. That's why I withdrew it. But I will now quote: "It's like amputation in a gangrenous limb." Those who are medical background would understand that in order to save life, or spreading poison to the rest of the body, even though it is very harsh, we sometimes have to decide to chop the limb off to save the life. So it is a violent act, but in a greater goodness. Thank you.
Thank you, Pragnesh.
Harish, there is a question from Paresh. I don't know whether you want to read it or I can do it for you. Paresh is asking, also, wasn't this Arjuna's purpose in life for righteousness, good over evil? Thanks, Paresh, for that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Anybody wants to comment on Paresh's question? Or Paresh, do you want to come online to give us a piece?
Hi, Madhuji, and hi, the group. I'm pretty new to the group, so I'm very novice. So I'm learning from all of you. But from the Mahabharata, what I know, my understanding is that Arjuna's purpose was to actually, have the righteousness for, good over evil, and that was his purpose in the war, to show people that, everyone has a purpose in life, and that was his defined purpose in life.
Thank you, Paresh. So Harish, I also wanted to just remind people, Arjuna had also used this term, Atatainas. Yeah. He had said there's all these fellows are Atatainas and stuff. And Atatainas, as we know, are the terrorists, the ones that burn houses, that rape women, that steal money, and do all sorts of nonsense, which Duryodhana was very much capable of. The society when Duryodhana was there is, I don't think, is not very different from the society in which we live in. So I would fully endorse Sudarshan's view of standing up to the right, even if it means you don't have physical violence, but even if it means that you put forth your arguments forcibly so that you establish your point of view. So that is more than enough in the modern society. We don't have to pick up arms to fight something. Even forceful argumentation to put up your standpoint is worthy as a cause, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant, Madhu. And like many of us are worried about wars, violence, and everything. So I didn't mean that at all. Not in a singular. And there are many other persons, and as a country, they will look after that bit. But it's about we, and particularly with the social media and everything, we can very well put forth our views. So that's exactly, and I think part of what we are doing, this Sahiti and this Hindu Knowledge Academy, is everything is part of the war anyway, in a different way. Like raising our awareness, raising how proud we are, how proud we should be about our past knowledge and everything. So bringing everything together, it is a part of already what we are doing actually. Thank you.
And I think, in the bottom line, I think Veena ji has mentioned that it's that Uttishta Parantapara, it's rise up and take action. So that I think is a very key point that comes out in a couple of these slokas. I know Veena ji, you'll touch upon this next time as well. So and again, all very good points, all about having that awareness to take the right action. And if the right action sometimes is to take up arms, then that's what you do. Okay. All right, so then we'll move on to the next shloka. This goes, so Pratibhaji, I'll have you and Shreya walk us through this.
So the shloka goes as, Najayate mriyate va kadachin, nayam bhutva bhavita vana bhuyah, ajo nitya shashvato yam puranu, nahanyate hanyamane sharire. Meaning, the soul never takes birth and never dies at any time, nor does it come into being again when the body is created. The soul is birthless, eternal, imperishable, and timeless, and is never destroyed even when the body is destroyed.
This shloka is the Veda mantra and it talks about the Nityatva of the Jivatma. According to Sri Madhvacharya's commentary, he says, the living entity and the Supreme Lord are both irrevocably established as unborn, eternal, and indestructible. The Supreme Lord, a Paramatma possessing a spiritual body, does not come into existence by being associated with the material manifestation, but is eternally existing independently, Swatantra. Death, correctly comprehended, is merely the separation of the embodied soul from the physical body, leaving it lifeless. Since for the Supreme Lord there is never any destruction of his form, there cannot be any connection to death by him. The eternal soul, the Jivatma, is also unborn and indestructible. Otherwise, creation could be considered simply a repetitive exercise going on and on, absent of purpose. So, the eternal soul is also permanent, but the eternal soul never exists independently. It has limited power, limited knowledge, incomplete in itself. The eternal soul is also permanent and it's incomplete in itself, dependent upon the transcendental energy of the Supreme Lord. In juxtaposition to that are the sublime attributes of the Supreme Lord, who is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. These are the natural attributes of the two. There is no modifications to be found in them. Therefore, the holy sages and rishis designated them both as Shashvata or permanent. Thus, in the Vishnu Purana, because the living entity is embodied in countless bodies from the beginning of time, it is known as Purana, meaning ancient. The eternal nature of the soul has been established in this verse, which is ever existing and beyond birth and death. Consequently, it is devoid of the six types of transformation, like existence in the womb, birth, growth, procreation, diminution, and death. These are transformation of the body, not of the self. What we call as death is merely the destruction of the body, but the immortal self remains unaffected by all bodily changes. This concept has been repeatedly emphasized in the Vedas. The Kathopanishad contains a mantra which is almost identical to this verse of Bhagavad Gita. न जायते म्रियते वा विपाश्चिन् नायं कूटश्चिन्न बभूव कश्चित् अजो नित्य शाश्वतोऽयं पुराणो न हन्यते हन्यमाने शरीरे. It's the same. The soul is not born, nor it dies. It did not spring from something, and nothing sprang from it. It is unborn, eternal, immortal, and ageless. It is not destroyed when the body is destroyed. The Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad states, Sava Esha Mahan Aja Atma Jaro Amaro Amrityo Abhaya. The soul is glorious, unborn, deathless, free from old age, immortal, and fearless. That's it.
Thank you, Pratibhaji. And this also reminds Madhu, when in many of our past lectures we've talked about how much the Kathopanishad and Bhagavad Gita are tightly connected. So if you can start with giving a little bit more light on that, and then I'll open it up for others for questions.
Sure, Harish. One thing I just wanted to pick up on this was in verse 12 onwards until 20, our dear Krishna has actually given a lot of evidence. So what is this all about? It is establishing the eternality of the souls and the perishability of the material body is what Krishna is after here in the battlefield, so that he prompts Arjuna to go and fight and do his duty as per his Swabhava, who is a Kshatriya. He is a Kshatriya by Swabhava, and he has to enact what his Swabhava is, which is to go and wage the war and establish Dharma. And in that process, he is trying to establish the eternality of the souls here. So how has Krishna gone about giving that explanation of eternality of souls? And what are the means of knowledge that we have? So we all know about the pramanas. What are the various means of knowledge? What we have is pratyaksha, anumana, and agama. So those are the only three means by which we can actually establish or gain knowledge of something in existence. So in the initial verses from 12 onwards, Krishna has given evidence from pratyaksha and anumana. He starts off his logic with an anumana, which is very interesting. Natve vaham jatunasam, just like me, so are you like that. So he is giving an anumana to start with his philosophy of eternality of souls. Then he talks about pratyaksha, like how a body, from birth to boyhood to youth to old age, and then it dies. This is what we see in our external world. And he takes a pratyaksha example to then again illustrate the eternality of souls. Now what he is doing is he's taking agama. So he has used pratyaksha and anumana, and in this verse, look, I will also cite you an evidence from the Vedas, from Krishna Yajurveda, from, as you said, from Katha Upanishad. I am going to give you an evidence with Apaurushaya Veda itself establishing the eternality of the souls as well as the eternality of the Supreme. So I think this is very significant in the chapter 2, because once Krishna has actually established the eternality of souls and the eternality of the Supreme, there is no way in which the souls can become identical with the Supreme. So that is an implied inference that one should get when we read chapter 2, that this consideration, soul being the Supreme Lord, is a complete delusion. at least from Krishna's perspective. He has clearly established there are two parallel lines. There is the supreme being, and then there is the eternality of the souls. And as how Pratibha ji mentioned, the eternality of the souls is eternally dependent on the supreme, who is also eternal, is what Krishna is reminding us again and again. So that is how I wanted to open up for discussion. So the philosophy of Krishna in Bhagavad Gita is very clear, which is, I am different, you are different, you are my servant. Full stop, period. No arguments here. Yeah, so that's how I wanted to finish. Thank you.
Thanks, Madhuji. And we were also discussing as we were preparing for this that during Gita Jayanti, when we had Sri T.S. Raghavendran give a talk, he had also emphasized, slokas 12, I think it was 12, 13, and 14 as pretty much being the essence of, what's in this chapter and also in the Gita. The one thing that you can always reflect on is this eternity of soul. I mean, obviously we've heard about this, but that perspective can truly be transformative if we really, understand it, right? So the context for how you approach things and how you approach life is different, when that, concept really sinks in. So just wanted to share that and open it up for any others for comments. Sushruth has been quiet. So Sushruth and Neetaji.
Thanks, Harish. I think that's a very good way of putting it, that the perspective of life depends on this. I completely agree. I think it's been wonderful, actually. Nice presentations. Thank you.
Excellent. And thank you, Neetaji. Any other thoughts or questions?
So the next, I think the core question, Harish, you picked on that about eternality, understanding the eternality of the souls is so key for understanding the philosophy of Sanatana Dharma, because this is exactly opposite to the view of the Charvakas. Yeah, and other schools of philosophy which have said soul as an entity actually does not exist, and that this body and its chemical combination is what makes us think and do stuff in life, and that there isn't a presence of souls, and that this life is only one, and then when you're here you make merry, and then in the process of making merry focus only on material pleasures, and one day you're going to fall down. That's the end of the story. So when that is your innings in this material world, make the most of it and go towards pleasure all the time at the expense of causing harm to anybody. Yeah, so keep going with that is the contradictory view, which is, as you know, is the prevailing view in the modern society, including in all parts of the world that we are living in. So that is the view of the present society. So having that more elevated view of life and existence, of eternality of souls, as you very beautifully pointed out, can be transformative. And then you start asking the bigger questions. If I am eternal, why am I eternal? Who made me eternal? How is it possible that souls can be eternal? It's a basic question. Everything has an origin, right, in life. So how can souls be there that they don't have an origin at all? So this opens up a whole slew of questions, which is what our rishis have done, have answered these kind of basic questions, and using that eternality of souls, they've gone to explain the nature of the societies in which we live in as well. So yeah, I quite like that the transformative view of eternality of souls. Thank you.
I think thank you. Thank you, Madhu and others. What it is in this sort of particularly, I'll probably say in this severe COVID crisis and everything, suddenly our existence and everything has been called into question, because previously we were taking life as very much casual. And in this context, and also in many other times where people have very much of a illnesses like cancer, where they threaten with a lifetime of another few months or something like that. In all these contexts, I think this will be very helpful, because people will be very happy to know that they're not, the soul is eternal. They're not going to go completely. And this sort of message at the time will be very helpful for them. Whether they go deep into this after that or not, it doesn't matter. At least know that they're not going to cease completely, and so that will be very, very helpful. So this message has to go definitely to many people. Thank you.
Can I come in here? So one of the things in the research for this quiz was there is a lecture on YouTube on, Madhuji kindly sent Swami, I think he's Muktananda's.
Mukundananda.
Sorry?
Muktananda. Is
Yeah.
it Muktananda or Mukundananda?
Mukundananda, I think.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah, so he has done some Hindi satsang on chapter 2. I've not heard all of it, but one of the things, I forgot exactly what he says, but what he's implying is that if a person from an Eastern philosophy like India asks who is what is Europe and what does a European believe, he's answered, there's a German philosopher who's done a lot of translation on Vedic scriptures, and he was explaining that they would say that a Western person will say, a European person might say that they are sort of, when they are awake, they are awake. When they go away, things stop, even though in reality things don't stop. So they seem to believe that in contradiction to reality. Something like that. I don't know. I hope I've not misquoted. So I found that interesting, like how would, because we have, obviously we have had 300 years of the Raj, so we don't really question it that way. But if we didn't know any other philosophies, how would you think about how other people think? I thought that was interesting.
Deval, all that I would say is 360 years of British Raj is a speck in the grand scheme of Indian civilization, Hindu civilization, the development of Sanatana Dharma, and so on. So I think 360 years it has I don't think it has a major impact, in the sense that our civilization has stood the test of time over 10,000, 15,000, 30,000 years, or whatever you want to do it from archaeology these days. So I think yes, the colonization of India has been helpful in one aspect, but I don't think in the grand scheme of things we should take too much importance to that. There have been more negatives rather than any positives that have come out of it. But let's not forget, we are all now spread around the world, and we are living in societies which is very open and very supportive and allows us to practice everything and so on. So I think in that context, we should be fortunate that we are in all parts of the world trying to practice our own religion. So that was one that was, I went lateral here. We just wanted to bring that in because you mentioned about 360 years. I'll stop there. There are a couple of questions, Harish, but we'll pick it up later.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. So one of the questions I think from Shreyas is very interesting. It's about what happens to the soul when the person passes away. Now, I will say, Shreyas, if you haven't already done that, there's a whole section of multiple videos that Madhuji has done on the journey of the soul, which I found absolutely fascinating. So I would highly recommend reviewing that. But Madhu, I'll ask you to maybe give a brief overview of that to whet Shreyas's appetite on what happens to the soul when the person passes.
Yeah, sure. So Harish, we can only go to Krishna and what Krishna has said here. Yeah, there's nothing else that should be said. So when Krishna said, Dehino asmin yata dehe kaumaram yavvanam jara tata dehantara praptihi dhiraha tatrana muhyati is the answer to that. So Shreyas, when you're so first thing you realize is there is this body that you've occupied. The body is constantly changing. It's changing all the time. Every moment, every day, your body is changing. But there is a permanent entity within that body, which is the soul. So says the scriptures. And as you read this and as you contemplate on this truth, you will realize that you will have your self-realization. That is the path to self-realization, to understand who you are, that you are eternal and you are different from your body. But when you start reading the Shastras, contemplate on this, then what you understand is the truth, what Krishna has said or Veda Vyasa has said. This body is constantly changing. So although this body is constantly changing, there is a static entity that is within this body that is experiencing all the changes this body is undergoing. From what? From, as Pratibha ji mentioned, from fertilization, and then delivery, then boyhood or girlhood, childhood, then you become a youth, then you become a grihastha, then you become old, then joint pains, aches and pains, and all the diseases catches up with you, and then you shed this body. Yeah, when you shed this body, what you shed according to our shastras is you only shed your gross body. Gross body is this human body that you have. But what our philosophy says is the soul is always carrying a subtle body that covers it. This is called linga sharira. Yeah, it always is covered with this subtle body. So that soul then carries on its onward journey, and based on all the things that it has done in its past life, it will occupy another body and again go through the same changes, interact with the external world, and so on. So the soul is always carrying a material covering. It could be subtle material covering, or it could be the gross material covering. When it has the gross material covering, as Pratibha ji mentioned, we call this as we are born. When we acquire a gross body, we artificially label this as we are born, and we shed this gross body, we call it as death. But actually, the soul does not, and it carries on with this linga sharira. Thanks, Harish. I hope that was not too complicated.
No, no, very good. I think that's
good. That was a great answer. Thank you so much, Madhuji and Harishji.
Thanks.
Definitely. And Neeta and Shushruth, I think you have a very good question as well, but I'll wait for a bit because I think that might be a bit more elaborate, but I'll quickly get to Kavita's question first and then we'll address yours. Kavita has this question about, when souls are not destroyed or created, then how do you explain the increasing population of humans and animals and all that? It is, I'll give you at least my view, and then Madhu, definitely want your perspective. What I was thinking is that I think it's some of that has got to do with the fact that, things are infinite, right? So I think once you get the concept that, jivas, the number of jivas can be, quite infinite, then the fact that it's a little higher at this point of time versus another time in the broad scheme of things is somewhat irrelevant. Now, the question may be, why are there more jivas in Bhuloka now than before? That may require, probably a more in-depth, discussion. But I don't know. Another very interesting question. So let me know.
How do you know there are more jivas now than before? The body does human.
With the population, world population is more now, isn't it? Compared to
no, but world population of what? Of humans.
Humans. That's what you mean.
Not necessarily human. It can be of any plant, animal. As I understand it, any material body is a body. So who has done the study to tell you that it is increasing?
Yeah, absolutely brilliant answer, Deval, because I completely agree with that. So yes, so we can take it up at some point in Chandogya. This point becomes important when after Pralaya, when the creation comes about, how many jivas actually are coming have come into this creation, and the view there is the Upanishads say this Brahman took one handful of jivas and just threw them in creation for this kalpa, in this creation. Okay, so that handful itself is infinite number of jivas. And what does our Bhagavatam say and other scriptures say? That these jivas are going up and down the ladder based on all the karmas that they are doing, and they're going around in this 840,000 forms of life that is spread all over the universe. It says certainly on earth there must be a lot of living species out there, and the jivas are going back, and they're going from humans. Who knows, a human when he dies may be born as an insect later, or as Deval mentioned, could be a grass, or it could be somewhere in the deep seas, be born as something else. The sum total of jivas is determined in every creation. And what these jivas do with regards to going up and down the evolutionary ladder is up to them based on their karmas. So although the human population seems to be going up, whereas the tiger population seems to be going down, Actually, Kavita, the answer to that is the sum total of jivas is pretty much the same. This is that handful that comes into creation. That is his Satya Sankalpa. Who is that handful of jivas that comes in? Only he knows. But within that handful of jivas, which themselves is a countless number, they're just going up and down the ladder. So it actually does not imply increase in population means new jivas have come about. All that it means is somebody was an insect or a dog before, has just happens to be born a human, and the nature will again correct itself, and again hopefully at some point all these overpopulated, there are lots of science fiction movies about human population and how it diminishes over a period of time. So all these fellows then will become an ant, an insect, and whatever else. So that balance is always kept. So there is no increase in number of jivas.
So I stand corrected there, I guess, Madhuji. So what you're saying is it's still very large, but still finite, right? Very, very large, still finite, and not something that we can count just in this loka, right? You have to have somebody has to account for it in multiple lokas in multiple forms.
I mean, Acharya has said that there are infinite jivas everywhere. So we just take that infinite is such a huge number. So if the Supreme has taken only a handful from his hand, that itself is infinite, then I don't know how many jivas are out there. So there must be infinite
there is
jivas.
another take on this. So everybody in Satyug and Treta Yug who went to all heavenly abodes, they have finished all their karmas there and they have all come back down now. You could take that view as well, and it has increased. I don't know.
So
it's a cycle. So it is constantly, it's a conveyor belt with a defined amount that is there in the universe, and then they just go through, and it just, we are only Kavita. So we are only at this point in the history of the universe where we are looking at it, which is again not even a fraction of a second with regards to timing of all the grand scheme of things. So things will eventually fall down. Human population cannot grow continuously. It will fall down. And we are seeing what is happening on Earth at this point, which some view this as a natural correction of what's going on in the universe.
Excellent.
Yeah,
I know Nita and Shrishtuth, I know you guys have your hands up, so maybe I'll have you respond, and also maybe you can use the time to ask your question live as well.
Thank you, Harishna. I was just going to comment that we are only seeing the jivas that are there on this earth. We don't know how many other lokas there are and what all jivas are present there. We have no idea. So it is fallacious to say that our population is increasing. Maybe somewhere it is decreasing. We don't know that. So the question that we were asking was, there are 4 entities that are described as being permanent or eternal. Paramatma and Jiva we have discussed, and I believe time and space. So I just wanted if Madhu could elaborate on that, please.
Sure, Sushruth. So if you look at chapter 2, the first half of chapter 2 is basically taking these 4 entities, as you know. So how do you prove the eternality of souls? So the first way that Krishna has done to prove the eternality of souls is, look at me, mate, I am eternal and you are dependent on me, so you are also eternal. So that is one example. Then he takes the look, there is not just you and me who are eternal, there are also other entities in this universe that are also eternal. And then he goes around to establish a logic that anything that is eternal is indestructible. That is another argument also he puts forward in chapter 2, the first half of chapter 2. Anything that is eternal is indestructible. Therefore, you are eternal. Therefore, you are also indestructible. So he goes around these 4 eternal concepts. So as he said, so if let's remind ourselves of this verse from Bhagavatam, for example, that is a key answer to that. It says was dravyam, karmashcha, kalashcha, swabhavo, jiva evacha. So actually there are 5 entities that are eternal that Bhagavatam has said, and all these 5 entities are eternally dependent on the Supreme, is the view there. So jivas, paramatma, karma, kala, and avyakrita akasha. So all these 5 are considered as eternal, which is interesting. It is a philosophical problem, not just in the East, but it is also a philosophical problem in the Western philosophy as well. And even in theoretical physics, it is a problem, because if you say Big Bang, then the question is, when did the Big Bang happen? Big Bang happened at a particular point of time, isn't it? So if that is the case, then time always existed, even before the Big Bang. Yeah, first point. The second one is, if Big Bang needs to happen, it needs to happen at some point in space. It cannot happen nowhere. It has to happen somewhere, right? That explosion needs to happen somewhere. So there has to be some kind of an ultimate space. So that is in our jargon, it's called avyakrita akasha. There is bhuta akasha, avyakrita akasha. So that also has to be eternal. And then this the sum total, Pragnesh was mentioning about conservation of mass and energy. So we all accept mass was never created, energy is never created, everything is there, it's only a transformation, and the sum total of matter stroke energy is always constant. And that is what our Eastern philosophers have already said. So that the Mula Prakriti is what that is. That Mula Prakriti is always constant and eternal. It never changes, it only undergoes transformation. So that is also eternal. Now, who are the fellows who are in this Mula Prakriti? It is you and me, the Jivas. So they've also said the Jivas are also eternal, and they go through their careers and then eventually find their destination. And who is the one that controls these Jivas? It is is it the Supreme Lord? And if you want to go back to the chapter 15, it is the Shri Tattvan, Lakshmi and Narayana is the view there. And they are also eternal. So there are so many eternals to account. And I hope that that makes sense. This is a grand view of how the existence is according to our Shastras. And the Jivas are eternal, and you would find it interesting that the natures of Jivas are also individual, unique, and eternal. Yeah. Otherwise, you cannot account for the variegateness that you see in the universe. I hope that answers the question, Sushil.
Thank you, Madhu. I know we're running out of time, but karmas eventually do get destroyed, don't they?
Yeah, karmas. Okay, so that's an interesting view. So the karma means what karma you're talking about. Are you saying that in moksha, jivas are not doing action? So it depends on how you define karma. Karma is kara, yeah? Kara is action. So action, not only in the material world, but also in moksha. In moksha, for example, are you not doing any action? Are you just sitting there, not even knowing you exist? You are constantly doing action there. So the activity is always there in jivas. There is never a point that the jivas are not without activity. And Krishna himself has said that in chapter 2. Yeah, that there is never a point. In chapter 3, he has said that in no point is the jivas don't do action. The action is always there. So that kind of karma is always there. The karma that you are talking about is the imprints on the linga sharira that happens when we do our transactions in life. So that is one type of karma, but the ultimate activity of the pristine jiva is still there in moksha. So that karma is also there. So in that sense, karma is also eternal. But it's an amazing question, Sushil. Thank you.
Thank you, Madhu.
Excellent. So I know we have to speed things up a little bit, but Sudarshan, will maybe go to you, because I do feel like some of the other slokas, might be delving into similar concepts, right? So maybe there won't be as many questions. So I'll go to you for your question.
Now, what it is, I just wanted to ask Madhu and maybe make a point. It's just about, you asked about there are more number of human beings now, with the population. I mean, ultimately the balance may be the same with the insects and animals. So previously there was not that much of human population, some last century or before that. So is it because we have more? Like the quality of the human beings is less, so the animal consciousness is being more born as human beings now compared to the previous times. So is that one reason? I know as I said, like the balance might be the same, but there are more human beings, but they are actually, the consciousness level is very low. Is that something right?
Possible, Sudarshan, because as they say, you come to, again, the Shastras say that you come to a human body, it's a sadhana sharira, you come to human body because you must have done a lot of good karma in your past life, and you come to a sadhana sharira, which is a human body, and you're quite right. And if you don't make use of this opportunity to progress further, then you lose that opportunity, and then you go back to the lower species of life, is what the constant message of Bhagavatam is, for example. So it is about, yes, we clearly there is increased human population now, so it is possible that there are a lot of jivas who have done good acts, and then they have done some good acts in the past, that they've got a human form of life. But with all the nasty things that we are doing at this point of time, eventually our number will decrease, and we will go back to the lower species, because we are not making use of the sadhana sharira that you have. Yeah. So I think you're absolutely right on that. So we will fall down if we don't progress, and that's the reason why the ones that are of sattvika nature will continue to make that journey. The ones that are tamasika jivas, for some karma, good karma, they might have been born as human beings, like Duryodhana, for example. If he's such a nasty fellow, how was he born as a human being? He must have done something to be born as a human being, but then of course he completely behaved so badly, so he will fall down into the lower species of life. So I think that is how the cycle operates, and Bhagavatam again and again gives us this analogy and says, you are born as a human being. This is your opportunity to make the most of it. This is your sadhana sharira. Otherwise, you will go down. Not just as something to admonish people or frighten them, but that is how the nature of life is according to our scriptures.
Thank you, Madhu.
All right. So I guess we can move on to the next one. Pratibhaji and Shreya, if you are ready, we'll do the 25th shloka.
Avyaktoyamachintyoyam avikaryoyamuchyate tasmad evam viditvainam nanushochitamarhasi. Meaning, it is declared that the soul is imperceptible, the soul is inconceivable, the soul is immutable. Therefore, understanding the soul as such, it is improper for you to lament.
According to again Sri Madhvacharya's commentary, he says it might be questioned that if the Supreme Lord is all pervading, then why is he not visible? The reason is because he is inconceivable. It may be further queried, how does he appear so endowed? Because of his power of remaining unthinkable. But this power does not come from any outside source, but is contained solely within himself. This is further confirmed in various Vedic scriptures. I'll just take this Pangni Stuti and Paramashruti. In Pangni Shruti, it is stated that the physical body, pleasures, and fragrances, light of wisdom, bravery, and the greatest of pleasures find their source within the ultimate Supreme Personality, the Supreme Lord Krishna. In Paramashruti, it is stated that the Lord Krishna is known to be both possessing a body and devoid of body. He possesses a spiritual transcendental body, but does not possess a physical body. His body is not constituted from the elements of material nature, adeha. He himself is his form, and this spiritual transcendental form is eternally existing beyond the scope of material existence. No one else is competent to comprehend this form. There is no creation, separation, or destruction of his spiritual transcendental body. He is the source, the original repository of all attributes. The awareness that I am this physical body is an experience common to all living entities. Even though such a distinct awareness is normal, it is perceived as special. Even though it is special, one does not perceive it as being separate from one's own individual consciousness. So, how can there be ever a manifestation of the resplendent Supreme Lord for one who cannot even first perceive their own individual consciousness within themselves? Although the attributes which appear contradictory in normal, mundane human behavior, it should be understood without a doubt that no such discrepancy ever exists in regard to the Supreme Lord when spoken of in various scriptures. Discrepancies imagined during reflection or speculated due to non reflection or all a product of ignorance. These attributes are self revealed. So in Bhagavad Gita again, one more translation, it says, our eyes made from the material energy can see only material objects. The soul being divine and beyond the realm of material energy is invisible to our eyes. Scientists had conducted experiments to perceive its presence. They put a dying person into a glass case and sealed the case to see whether the departure of soul would crack the glass. However, the soul left the body without the glass box getting cracked. Being subtle, the soul did not need physical space for its movement. Being subtler than the material body, the soul is also inconceivable to our intellect. The Kathopanishad says, Indriyebhya parahyartha, artebhyascha param manaha, manasastu para buddhir, buddhiratma mahan paraha. Beyond the senses are the object of the senses. Subtler than the object of the senses is the mind. Beyond the mind is the intellect. And subtler than the intellect is the soul. The material intellect can only comprehend material concept, but can never reach the divine soul by the power of its contemplation. As a result, knowledge of the self requires external sources, which are the scriptures and the Guru. When I was going through this, I did have a question. I was just thinking, we have not seen Paramatma, nor our Jivatma within. And as he said, it's inconceivable. And even the medium through which we can see is also not known. How, with the scriptures, with our mind, intellect, how are we going to understand this? So the faith is on the with the rishis, the scriptures, taking that as our faith we go. But as Madhusudan ji always keeps telling, according to this Jaitirtha Acharya, once only when you know him, only when you see him, you know him. Only or when you know him, you see him. So how do you know him? So know him again. I just wanted to ask Madhusudan ji, how is this? How do you go about this? Hare Krishna.
So yeah, thanks Pratibhaji. That's such an important statement. So I know we are running short of time. We got another maybe 30 minutes. So I'll take that question very briefly, and hopefully other friends would also nip in. So I think Pratibhaji, the answer here is the Shastras tell us open your third eye. Without opening your third eye, you're not going to see yourself and also see the other person next to you, who is your Paramatma, who is inside you. So what is the third eye? So as we have all studied over the years, yes, there is Jiva, and then there is a Linga Sharira, and then it's got various coverings, including the mind, then the Buddhi is there, the mind is there, then all the Indriyas are there, and you very nicely cited that mantra from Katha Upanishad, and how one is superior to the other. So you have all these material things, and what is currently happening, you're using only your material mind. That is the mind, which is a evolute of your brain. And you're constantly using that, using your sense organs, you're seeing external objects, and you're making decisions using your components of the mind, which is 5, as you know, including your intellect, to run your transactions of your life. So you as a soul, you're more facing outwards at this point of time, looking at the material world and using the material mind to experience what is happening in the external world. And your mind is constantly moving, and it is constantly thinking only about the external world. Yeah, chanchalam hi manaha. Yeah, so those verses come to our mind from Gita. So what the Shastras is saying, Yajnavalkya was saying that to Maitreyi, right? Atma va are drashtavyaha, shrotavyo mantavyo nitidhyasitavyaha Maitreyi. So the third one becomes very important. So you use your material eyes and ears and so on, and do what? Shrotavyo and mantavyo. So you learn with your eyes and your ears, you do your philosophical discussion, and then you understand the truth. And then once you've understood the truth, you go into meditation about those truths. You do nitidhyasitavyaha. So that is where our Krishna is also taking us through in the Dhyana Yoga. That is where he is going to tell us later in Bhagavad Gita. You go towards that, mate, and then what you do is, you have to reach a point where you completely stabilize your material mind. You're so constantly influenced by your material mind, you have failed to realize that you have your own Swarupa Indriya. Your Jiva itself has got its own mind. You're not using that because you're so fixated on using your material mind. So you have to still your material mind in dhyana. When that happens, the philosophy there is your third eye opens, and that third eye is yourself. That is the Swarupa Indriya of the Jivas. And then that goes inwards. First it realizes itself, yes, I am this fellow now. And then it goes and sees the one who is inside him. So that is the journey. And it sounds like a complex journey, and unfortunately it is a complex journey. There is no easy way around it. And if people say this is very easy, good luck to them. It probably needs lives and lives of being born as human to reach that level that many rishis reach that level, they had to open their third eye to have their own self-realization. So that is the process. It is not an impossible process. The way we can get inspiration is from our rishis who achieved that. So perhaps by putting that into practice, we might be able to reach that state. So yes, that self-realization needs to happen, and then only God realization. So that was the process that I wanted to briefly mention, but open up for discussions. I got Sudarshan raised his hands.
That may be raised from before.
Madhuji, sorry, can I put in a word here? Because I also read that in the 15th verse of Acharya's commentary. He has mentioned it, not by merely being equipoised and dispelling all the sorrows does one become self-revealed, realized. This indicates that the correct process, when one has relinquished all conceptions of being the physical body, one becomes naturally filled with the spiritual attributes that are inherent to the soul. That is, I think, Pravritti scripture, yes, said. Fixture of this awareness, one is known as Purusha. That's what Acharya ji mentions, that only when we lose the, as the conception of physical, as we are not the physical body, when we get into that conception, I think we will get into this thing as, will be equal, or, we will know what it is.
Shiraji, is that,
so I don't know to explain it in English, but I have understood what that was, what Pratibhaji was asking,
So Shiraji, just to clarify, is that in Shloka 15 you said?
Yeah, in Shloka 15, in Acharya's commentary, he has mentioned it somewhere, because I wrote it down because I felt it's very important. So, and I've written it down. That's why I'm saying,
Perfect. Yeah.
Harish, Suresh, just one thought on this shloka. The avyakta, achintya, avikarya are attributes of Paramatma also. In the sense, in the context, is this shloka also telling us, reminding us of the bimba, pratibimba concept? And then therefore, is that a message that, at least I was just wondering, if one could interpret it as both jivas are the pratibimba of Paramatma, and therefore the eternality of both what we spoke in the earlier verse and the need not to lamenting, but to be lamenting on the bodily destruction.
Yeah, I had the same question. Is this verse talking about the soul or the Paramatma?
It's both is how Devalji I was thinking, because it's one is the reflection of the other. So one, if you take the bimba pratibimba concept, so these attributes are common, but as we saw a little earlier, the soul's existence is limited while it's unlimited in Paramatma. So these apply that way to a certain extent to both Paramatma and Atma, I suppose.
So Pratibhaji, is there any discussion on that in the commentaries on whether this is the scope is just soul, Atma or Paramatma? Or Madhu, if you have any thoughts, that'll be great as well.
Yeah, sure. Harish, one thing I was going to say there was, we know that Vedas have at least 3 levels, minimum 3 levels of meaning. Gita has at least 10 different levels of meaning, at least, not just 10, more than 10, but at least minimum 10. And Vishnu Sahasranama has got at least 100 different levels of meanings. So if you take that view, the 10 different meanings of each verses of Gita, I think it's important to understand that, because when we read different commentaries and different approaches to that, they are not mutually contradictory to each other, but they may be approaching the verses from a particular point of view as long as that concords with the grand view of the Upanishads and Vedas, that is fine. But if it goes against the grand view of the Upanishads and Vedas, they cannot be considered as pramana. So it has to be conducive to that, number one. So you can have 10 different views minimum. So I completely get what Suresh ji is mentioning about, could this be Paramatma or it could be Jivatma. So actually, if you go through the verses in the first 38 verses of chapter 2 or elsewhere, in many verses you can take both views, and in fact in the same verse you can take first line to imply the jiva and the second line to imply the Paramatma, or both lines to imply jivas, or both lines to imply Paramatma. It just looks at your view, how you approach the verse. That is the elasticity of the Gita verses, as long as you get the right truth that is expounded in the Upanishad. So Bimba Pratibimba Baba is very much within this verse of the eternality of the souls, is because they are the eternal dependent. They are eternally dependent on the eternal Paramatma. So that it is that eternal dependence concept is what Bimba Pratibimba actually is, isn't it? It is not that the object and the reflection means there is a mirror and then there is a reflection. That mirror is what we call as the Upadhi, and once that mirror is destroyed, the reflection is gone. So similarly, when the ignorance, Upadhi called the ignorance, is gone, the jiva is gone, and the jiva becomes the same with Brahman, is not sound philosophy, because that is not what Krishna is saying here in that Bimba Pratibimba. His view of Bimba Pratibimba is of dependence. The reflection is dependent on the object's existence. When the object is there, only the reflection is there. When the object moves, the reflection moves. When the object goes away, the reflection goes away. When the object smiles, the reflection appears to be smiling. So that is what is the Bimba Pratibimba of dependence. There is this dependence being, there is the independence being. The object is Brahman, whereas the reflection is the Jiva, which is dependent on all actions on the Brahman. So that Upadhi there is that concept. And the beauty of that also is within chapter 2, there is a verse that discusses this aprameyasya tasmad yuddhasva bharata. Yeah, that aprameyasya word in the initial phases of Sankhya Yoga talks about anashinaha aprameyasya tasmad yuddhasva bharata, saying that the reflection is the jiva itself, the swarupa deha itself is the reflector, and the swarupa deha is eternal and it's eternally dependent. So all these kind of subtle concepts come up, and this verse is a classic example of Bimba Pratibimba Bhava philosophies that many of our gurus talk about this again and again. And that understanding the dependence is the first step to self-realization. If you don't understand dependence, then you cannot proceed to self-realization at all. So and that is the reason why many acharyas of certain schools, they hanker on this again and again. Get yourself known about dependence. You are the servant of the servant of the servant of the servant of somebody else. So you are the lowest of the lowest. Get into that habit. Then you have scope for self-realization. Thank you, Harish.
Excellent, Madhu. So just a quick time check. We have 15 minutes left. So can folks stay for a few more minutes? Because we do want to spend some time to do the quiz. And then maybe what we can do is we can take the last shloka, Veena-ji, and maybe perhaps do that in the next session. Or if people can stay longer, we can actually plow through it. Any preference one way or another?
So Harish, I'm certainly game. Certainly, I'm guilty of going longer. So
okay, we can go. Okay, in that case,
I'm perfectly fine. I don't know what
I think so. It should be fine.
Okay,
maybe
right.
we can reduce for the time being after this, so that like you can go through all your stuff. Yeah, thanks.
Perfect. Okay, so Veena-ji, we're on 37th shloka. So if you can give us the context, and then Shreya can chant it.
So in the previous verses, Krishna has made Arjuna aware of the sins he would be committing by non-performance of his duties. So he has also highlighted the loss of honor, shame, disdain, and slander that would follow. This would cause an insufferable pain. Then Krishna says,
Tato va prapsyasi swargam jitva va bhokshase mahim tasmad uttishta kaunteya yuddhaya krita nischayah. Meaning, if you fight, You will either be slain on the battlefield and go to the celestial abodes, or you will gain victory and enjoy the kingdom on earth. Therefore, arise with determination, O son of Kunti, and be prepared to fight.
Krishna puts forth two alternatives here: victory that will lead to kingdom, or death that will lead to higher abodes. Arjuna should not have any problems with either of these. A superficial read of the verse may lead to an understanding that death is being glorified. The commentators have also raised this question: would those who win and live have to be content with the material blessings? And would the doors of the higher abodes be shut for them? It is important to note that there is nothing to suggest that in this verse. While death in a noble cause leads to higher abodes, victory would lead to both immediate enjoyment of the victory and then to higher abodes when the time comes. Commentators have also seen this verse as a reply to some of Arjuna's earlier questions. In verse 6, Arjuna says he does not know what would be beneficial, victory or defeat. In verse 7, while surrendering, he states that he is confused about his duty. And in verse 8, he admits that even victory would not enable him to overcome grief. Krishna says victory or defeat really does not matter. He has already given enough understanding as to why there should not be undue grief. Thus, having clarified all of Arjuna's doubts, Krishna then says, Tasmat, therefore, Uttishta, stand up and prepare to fight with determination. So, one clear message that Krishna is giving is Uttishta, to stand up and face all adversities. That is the reason I chose these two shlokas, because of the Uttishta word. And here Krishna also says not to be bogged down by fear. Instead, put all our faith in Lord Krishna and find the courage within. That is the message, I think, from these shlokas. Harish.
Excellent, Vinayji. So I think the Uttishta point is it comes across very clearly. Just in terms of the question that you have, I think there is fair bit of questions on who is eligible to get promoted and get to swargas, and who becomes nitya samsaris, and what the outcome of the battle will have on the that will impact the destiny of the individual. So any thoughts, discussions? I know Sudarshan, you had your hands up. Did you want to contribute, or is that an old hand? Okay, maybe it isn't him. So yeah. So any other any thoughts from folks on this?
So the what?
If I remember the earlier lectures, and Madhuji can correct me if I'm wrong. So the person who goes to, so there are 14 lokas, right? 7 up, 7 down. So you go to Swarga Loka if you pray to the God with that portfolio, that is, and you get the benediction, that's where you go. So Satya Loka is the ultimate. Swarga Loka is Indra's Loka. I don't know, I may be wrong, but yeah.
Sure, they will. So again, as I said, there are at least 10 different ways of approaching verses. So one view is, as you said, if you win a battle, you'll go to Swarga and experience all the pleasures of that Swarga has to give. And once you have exhausted all that, you will come down. So that is one view on this. But those who decide to fight the battle and win the battle, do they just become a king and enjoy all the pleasures only on earth? So that is that question that comes. So in that point, why should I, I might as well die, I might as well lose the battle and then go to Swarga. Why should I win a battle and then be on earth and enjoy the pleasures of earth as Nitya Samsari? The answer to that is two folds. One is not really Nitya Samsarians. Nitya Samsarians are the ones that are constantly circling in samsara. But if you win what Krishna is telling is, if you win the battle, look what happens to you, Arjuna. You will become a king and you will enjoy all the pleasures of the king, but also you will go to Swarga. It is not that he will just become a king here. He will also go to Swarga. But he is also saying, if you lose the battle also, you got nothing to lose, because you will still be going to Swarga because you have done your duty. You have stood up, Uttishta, and you have waged your war based on what you have been asked to do. So either way, you got nothing to lose. You will go to Swarga, but if you win the battle, you will also have material enjoyment as a king and then go to Swarga. The other thing, Harish, I wanted to mention is this word Swarga comes not just in Gita, but also in Upanishads and various other places. The word Swarga comes in various places. So how to understand the word Swarga? Does Swarga just mean going to Indraloka and having a nice time and then coming back? No, you again also have to look at the etymology of Swarga. Okay, Swarga means Swa, Ra, and Ga. Swa, Ra, and Ga becomes Swarga. Okay, Swa means your, Ra means Ananda, Ga means Gamayati. Ra means Ramate, Ga means Gamayati. You attain your own Swarupananda. When do you attain your own Swarupananda? Not in Indraloka, but actually in Moksha. So Upanishads also, when they use the word Swarga, they don't necessarily mean just this Indraloka or other lokas. They actually also mean Moksha. Moksha is also called Swarga in one aspect when you look at the etymology of words. So it is clear. So if you wage the war, you do your duty, you exhaust your karmas, you will eventually go to that Swarga also. Thank you.
And Vinaji, do you want to talk about this last question? Is Arjuna's question answered?
Yeah, it's in the 6th verse. He asks about he does not know what would be beneficial, victory or defeat. So for that, Krishna answers it does not matter whether it is victory or defeat. So you are going to get to moksha. So do your karma, do your duty as a kshatriya and fight. Uttishta, rise and fight.
Excellent, Vinaji. Any other thoughts from the people? Again, Sudarshan, I'll call upon you because I thought you have raised your hand, but if not, anybody else? Pragnesh,
I didn't
call upon you.
I didn't raise my hands, but I think I'll carry on with what Madhu has said. Like, I think if we take all these things, there's a clear advice about what is the right thing to do. I mean, when Krishna says to Arjuna, you should be really waging the war, and that is the right thing to do at that moment, not to do anything different, not to go backwards, and So in that sense, again, we have not done what is the right thing, many a times. That's one of the reasons, the later part of the Indian history in the past 8 centuries, we're not we've taken a different route. We've not done what is the right thing. We've taken a different route, and that's why we are here, where we are sort of in a position to even defend our own dharma in our own country. So it is exactly what Krishna is saying. If at the right time everything is done, and that's the right decision to take, and you will otherwise you'll be going down in the consciousness, down in your birth and everything. So you won't be going to Swarga, you'll be going down. So again, I'm coming back to the same thing because I feel it's very important to sort of awaken the Hindus as well, using the same context.
Actually,
Sudarshan.
now I see it that, you spend more time with Sudarshan, you do get inspired to, for action, no doubt.
Thank you.
Hello, Madhuji. Can I ask one question?
Yes, sir. Yes, Pragneshi, go ahead.
Please go on.
Hello. Yeah, no. The problem I think now we are facing, where I think all the Indians are going through what's called an Ashoka syndrome. I've heard about that.
Yeah. So
Because
Manjunathji,
the problem we have is we become too kind. Sorry.
So, no, sorry, go on, because I'm so pleased that you brought that up, because I was also going to nip in with that concept, but please go on and explain, please.
Because when Ashoka was the very fierce king, and he fought the battle, and he was a Hindu at the time, and he won the war, and he was ruling the world. And suddenly he became a pacifist, and he said, love your neighbor, when they, don't kill, and all kind of a thing came. And that was the beginning of our downfall gradually, because after Ashoka, I think Gupta kingdom came, Mauryas came. They were also very powerful. They got Gori 16 times, and he didn't kill him. And finally, he kills Maurya, the great king, and that was the beginning of our thing. And we are suffering from this Ashoka syndrome. That's what our ex-general, army general said. That is our problem, and that's the reason we are suffering. And that's I just thought we should.
Yeah, Manjunathji, thank you
You
so
got any
much.
views on that?
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up, because many times my guru has also said the very fact that we've forgotten the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita is the reason why we are in this situation. And the reason why we have forgotten Bhagavad Gita as to what is ahimsa. Ahimsa is a relative ahimsa. It's not an absolute term. It's a relative ahimsa is what Krishna had always said. And we forgot that. So we are all now suffering from Ashoka syndrome, which is what I've heard my gurus constantly telling me that. So thank you so much for bringing that up.
Okay. Any other questions, or should we? I now need to go on to the quiz. Okay. All right. So, Deval, I think you're up for the quiz. So for us, if some of you may have used Kahoot in the past for a quiz. So if you have not, what might be helpful is if you have another device, maybe a phone, go into www.kahoot.it. And in a few minutes, I'll give you a code. And if you type in that code on the page, then it'll actually let you enter into the quiz, and then the questions will come up, and you'll be able to answer some of those questions. It'll be a fun way to engage, but I think it's more interesting because some of these things, as you can imagine, will not be straightforward answers. So there's going to be a healthy discussion on some of these things. So I'll give folks maybe just a minute to get another device and log on to kahoot.it. and give me 2 minutes or less, 30 seconds to give you a code. Okay, just bear with me. By the way, are you guys able to still see my screen?
Yeah, Harish.
Okay, perfect. So there's going to be a pin that comes up. Please type that into your kahoot.in thing. It's 4687548.
It's coming up as kahoot.com, not in.
IT. No, it's kahoot.it.
Got it. Yeah, got it. 468.
So Harish, my only worry is there's going to be name and shaming in this Kahoot.
It's okay. It's a fun quiz. I think most of except for one, most of the things have been covered already. So
maybe we should log off and all log in as Madhu.
Shrut and Neeta, you should join separately.
Separately, yeah. You cannot hide behind the other one. All right, so we have Manjunathji, Deval, Ajit, Sushrut, Suresh. So we'll give a couple of more minutes for people to join. All right. Are we good enough to start, Devalji? We have
yeah, I think we'll run out of time.
Let's get started. I think you guys can participate either way. I think it should be fun.
Okay, so before we start the quiz, I just wanted to say a couple of things. So the way I've done this quiz is I was just fascinated with the amount of new words that have been there in the first 37 shlokas of this chapter. So it's all about slightly about meanings and the linguistics of the words. So that's the theme, and yeah, and I'll explain as I go along. So it's all about words. Yeah. Okay.
You started? Okay. Okay, I'll read it out also. Sankhya relates to which of the following? The 25 tattvas, the 6 pramanas, the gunas, or the 3 modes of matter, or the duality of Purusha and Prakriti. So those are your 4 options. All right. So Deval, you wanna?
Okay, so this is the wrong answer actually, 6 pramanas. And after we did the dry run of the quiz, I realized it only this morning. So it's more about describing the thinking behind this question. So I wanted to introduce a little bit about Samkhya philosophy, and both Harish and Madhusudanji has already sort of talked about it. So just to recap, Samkhya comes in, if you look up the word and what it means, it comes up with 2 different philosophies. So the word itself means something to do with counting or calculating or something about groups and numeric, relating to number. But it also refers to something which is you deliberate or you reason and you find some rationales. And also, like we discussed, that the Samkhya school of philosophy is different to the Samkhya yoga in this, what this chapter means. So in this chapter, the school of philosophy is based on systematic enumeration and rational examination. And it's not 6 pramanas, it's 3 pramanas, which we discussed, which is the anumana, the perception, the shabda, and the inference. Experience. So that is the philosophy on which some schools of Hinduism is based on. But as we discussed earlier today, in this context, it means about knowledge, the knowledge which is gained from, so it's about empirical knowledge, which means it is knowledge that is gained from experience rather than from deductive reasoning or some innate ideas. So which would be a theoretical knowledge. So this is experimental and observation knowledge. And I just wanted to bring in one point which we've not mentioned here, but we have discussed it in our discussions, is we all want to move to, remove ignorance and move towards light of knowledge. But we must remember that the receiver of the knowledge is the soul. And I don't think it is directly said in this chapter, but I think it is important to sort of capture that.
Okay, so
that was I think. Any other discussion points?
Yeah, I think on this one we did talk about in the beginning. I think Deval, so we can maybe move on to the next one, unless somebody has something to add. Okay, next question.
You know what? I'm not going to take part in this. This doesn't seem right. Yeah.
No problem. Which of the following is not a school of Astika philosophy? Samkhya, Charvaka, Yoga, and Vedanta. Okay, 5 more seconds. I think most people will get this one right, I hope. Yep, I think we have a lot of good. So if you can go quickly to the 4, 6. So yeah, Deval, you want to quickly summarize this?
So yeah, so that's where if so there are 6 Astika schools and 4 Nastika schools. So Astika means believing that there is a higher force, or for a colloquial word of God, who is higher. It's a higher being, and then you've got a list in which Samkhya school is one of the schools, and what we are trying to study is the last one, which is the Vedanta. And the Nastika school, it does have explanations about creation and origin and etc., but they don't necessarily believe in a higher energy form, is my understanding. Yeah. Back to you, Harish.
All right, so we can move on to the next one. What does the word Arya mean? Insider, German, evolved and cultured, or confused? We've heard Krishna refer to Arjun either as an Arya or not being an Arya. So, and I believe Arya is also the root of the word Aryan. And, so
yeah. He uses the word Anarya.
Oh
well, everybody's.
All right, everybody got that one right. So it's that's great.
If you go to the Wikipedia, it is both an Indian and Persian word and means noble one. But so in sort of Indian and Sanskrit context, it is a term for a perfect gentleman. And the Vedic scriptures tell us to induce humans to become Aryans in all respects. So Sri Krishna finds Arjun's present condition in conflict with that ideal. So he's sort of telling him off by calling attention to his confusion and bringing him higher up to his ideal state of being. And then some of the commentators sort of comment on how sometimes God deliberately puts a person in turmoil so that he or she may be forced to search for knowledge. So the whole, and to remove the confusion. So the doubt is, when the doubt is resolved, the person receives a higher level of understanding. And then we have Sanjaya in the last couple of lines telling how he has received higher level of understanding. So I thought that was quite interesting. And the whole of the first chapter sort of is explained. So basically, I think some of the commentators are saying Krishna is letting Arjuna become more and more confused so that he comes to a point of surrender. Yeah, I've also put sort of the word Bhagavan Uvacha comes here, where it puts Sri Krishna in a supreme sort of position. I'll come to that in a later slide as well. Okay, next.
Next one. So multiple correct answers here. If morality is contextual, not categorical, then why did Bhishma fight on the side of the Kauravas? What was his role? I think the hint is the sixth shloka on this in this chapter. He had to protect the throne of Hastinapur. He wanted to die on a battlefield. He knew his death was by the hands of Shikhandi, and he was the root of evil that caused the war. He wanted to die by Krishna. Okay.
Okay, so this question is does not have, I mean, all four of them are the right answers. The reason I got this is I thought I'll introduce the word Bhishma and how he got the title of Bhishma because he took this fearful or fierce or terrible oath in protecting the throne of Hastinapura when he took the Pratigya. So the question is something that we've been discussing a little bit, and that's something that I sort of mull over. So is dharma and adharma absolute? He took the oath in the context of what his father wanted, not realizing what is going to happen, however many years down the line. Does that dharma change? Or is it in the category? So like in this situation, this becomes dharma. In that situation, something else becomes dharma. So I think this is quite an important question because Arjuna is seeing Bhishma on the other side and he's seeing Dronacharya on the other side. I didn't pick up Dronacharya because he's attached to his son. So it's sort of, there is more of an explanation, but I was still puzzled why Bhishma sort of fought on the sides of the Kauravas. And then there is some commentary that he is a perfect example of a sage who had fathomed all the mysteries of life and death. And he had risen above everything. He had even consented to taking the side of the wicked because that is not, he didn't want the Kauravas to win. So he had already surrendered to God, that he had already surrendered to whatever Krishna wanted. But as his duty, he wanted to die as a Kshatriya and not to lament. He is accepting all circumstances which Krishna is putting in his path.
Any thoughts or comments on that one?
I mean, it was Sajit here. Is it also a thing that it's a way to show that even though you could be as strong and righteous as Bhishma, but if you're in the path of adharma, you don't win?
But if he is protecting the throne of Hastinapura, that is what he is, his pratigya. So he is still doing dharma, isn't it?
Yeah, but he's against. He's standing for something that he doesn't fully believe in. He's standing against the god or dharma in that sense. Is
I don't know.
Pragnesh, it looks like you want to chime in.
Yeah, I think the Bhishma is criticized in the scriptures not for supporting, but not walking out at the time of derobing. Because if you can't challenge something, at least you should be not part of that situation. And he didn't walk out of that. That's why he had to, despite of being Ichamrityu, lie on arrowhead bed for 6 months. That's my understanding. So when we are facing the situation,
and can I say one?
Yeah, please. Sorry.
Go ahead, Shilaji.
In one of the commentaries, it is said that Bhishma is a sthita prajna. So he, even though he knew what he was doing wrong, he did as God asked, I mean, what he had to do at that situation. So he fought for the Kauravas. It's in one of the 5 commentaries, you know.
Yeah, but actually my question is, was it a dharmic thing that he did by taking his pratigya? In that context, or is it a category thing that because he has taken that pratigya, he has to continue with it? That is the question. It's
He did it because
I've
he
not
had already
read.
taken the pratigya and he had to do it.
Can I briefly come in, Harish?
Yeah.
Just want to insert an interesting point. So let us not forget the one view on this whole Mahabharata situation is this is all a divine play. When Sri Krishna comes down as Avatara, all his family also comes down and they enact something so that fellows like us can look at it and dissect and have the discussion that we are having about why Bhishma did that, why he did not do that. So one view there is Bhishma is the Avatara of Dyu Namaka Vasu. So as you know, there are Vasu, Rudra and Adityas, Ashta Vasus. There are 8 Vasus. In that, one Vasu is Dyu. His name is Dyu. And he is Dyu Namaka Vasu who comes down when Vishnu comes down as Krishna. And then there is a divine play that happens. So that is another interesting angle that I just wanted to contribute. I got Neeta also raised her hands.
Yes, Neeta? Or Shushu, do you want to go? Okay. All right. So I guess we can.
So Madhu, can I ask you something?
Go ahead.
So last time you were explaining that Duryodhana is Kali's avatara. So Bhishma is Ganga's avatara, isn't he? So
Bhishma is one of the Vasus. So as you know, Vasu, Rudra, and Aditya.
Okay.
One among the 8 Vasus. So his name is called Dyu. So that's what the Mahabharata Tatparya, for example, will talk about.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes, Neetaji.
Okay, just wanted to say something. Just because he has taken a vow or made a pratigna that he will do this, he does not have to do it if the situation is not right. And Krishna himself is an example, isn't it? Where he says, I will not pick up any weapons, but he does pick up weapon to, again, for Bhishma's sake itself, because Bhishma has taken another pratigna that I'll make Krishna pick up weapons. So Krishna breaks a vow just to please his devotees. So it doesn't have to, he can break it if it is not the right situation. That is what I think it teaches us.
Yeah, but Krishna breaks it because he's being benevolent. I
think we are supposed to follow his
you're
example.
right. The commentary goes on to explain what you've just explained. And that is why Krishna, he wants, it's a play, it's a leela, like whatever. Yeah.
Deval, you want to move on?
Shall we go on, move on?
Yeah.
To
Yeah. You move on to the next question. What was Sanjaya thinking when he reported the scene to Dhritarashtra? The Eva Muktva Rishikesham Gudakesha Parantapa. So does he say Arjuna will not fight? Arjuna was speechless. Was he saying that Krishna will sort it out? Or was he saying that Krishna will be benevolent to Arjuna's distress? Okay. I think the answer is Krishna will be benevolent. So.
Okay. Yeah. So this commentary talks about the words that Sanjaya uses to tell Dhritarashtra what is happening. So in the previous verse, he has put his arrow down and he's saying he's not going to fight. I think the point I wanted to make is the 4 words that have been used. So for Krishna, the word of Rishikesha and Govinda has been used. And for Arjuna, Gudakesha and Parantapa has been used. So the answer to the previous question is that he is going to be, he's trying to caution Dhritarashtra that don't get lulled into a false sense that the war won't happen or Kauravas will win, because Arjun will fight. He has conquered ignorance. So he is confused. I mean, there is deeper meaning to the word ignorance as well. And he basically, Rishikesha, who is in control of all the senses, is going to give him the knowledge. And the word Govinda, so in terms of what is Gita, it keeps, one of the allegory there is that Gita is like Krishna Lila, in which Krishna is the cowherd and Arjuna is the cow. And what we get by the milk, which is going to remove, our ignorance, is the Gita, the Bani, Gita Bani, that is going to remove that ignorance because of the milking of the cow. This is an allegory to listening to Gita. So Govinda is the word that has been used over here, that also sort of tells us what is going to happen, that Krishna is going to give us the knowledge. Vinda meaning finding, and it translates as the finder of the Veda, because Veda is the knowledge in which the ignorance is going to go away. And it sort of stresses the importance of Krishna as omniscient, as in he knows the past, he knows what is happening currently, and he knows what is going to happen next. Okay, any comments?
Any comments on this? Guess we can go to the next one. Next question. Again, it's a multiple choice. Why did Krishna smile at Arjuna? He knew the bigger scheme of things. Sarcasm and subtle anger. Remove pride in Arjuna, and to substantiate Arjuna's fitness to receive spiritual knowledge. Again, there's more than one right answer. Yep, and the answer is all of it.
Yeah, so this is where I was fascinated by the word Bhagwan, which is the first time it enters Gita. And I don't know if the rest of the Mahabharata talks about Krishna as being Bhagwan, and what does the word mean. I think taking on from the previous explanation of Govinda, so Bhagwan can be thought about as Bha implying cherisher and supporter of the universe. He's a leader and an impeller and a creator, and has these 6 properties, which are sort of listed there: glory, splendor, might, wisdom, dispassion. And were as in the elemental spirit, in which, as in which is there, which is pervaded and is existing all beings. And I think by using this word, this is the first time he speaks. It doesn't say, Madhusana Uvacha or Rishikesh Uvacha. It says Bhagwan Uvacha. I think it is trying to say that it is Krishna is in the supreme position and is unparalleled. And I think it is stressing that. But I don't know. That's just my take on it. It's open to discussion.
We can go to the next one. So now, since we are doing Sankhya Yoga, this is all about counts. So how many qualities of soul is described to mean that it's eternal?
So this is in shlokas, 218 to 224.
Okay. I think we have all the answers in, so I can skip the count. The answers.
We've got 6 and 8.
Yeah, we got 6 and 8 mostly. Yeah. We counted 7, right?
We counted 7, so it would be interesting if I might be wrong, but so I'll just go through them. So Nityasyo, which is Nitya, which is eternal. I mean, obviously all of these mean eternal, but it's also, Nitya is also meaning permanent, constant, fixed, and innate. Ajo as in unborn, which doesn't drop. Shasvasto ayam is immortal, permanent, or continuous. In there was another word, future, also in there, so I didn't understand that. Purano is ancient or past, antique, legend, but it also is a name of sea. So I didn't get that, but that's what it is. Avyayam, immutable and everlasting. Avadhyo, which is immortal or can't be divided or cut off. And Sanatana, which is permanent, forever, lasting, everlasting, unending. People who got 8, is there something I missed?
Avikara. I thought there was a word avikaro.
Avikara means unchanged. Okay, so let's do the next quiz.
Okay, all right. How many other qualities of soul is described by Krishna? 5, 6, 7, or 8? I think we have the answers in. The answer is 8. I think most people got 8.
Got it right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So avikaryo is the bottom from the third, which is unchangeable. So I know it is not an exact sort of. I thought unchangeable was different to eternal. It is, I think the words that come up is unchangeable and invariable for avikaryo. So these are different. I thought these words talk about a different quality of the soul rather than soul being eternal. So I've sort of separated these words out. Sarvagata, meaning all pervading, everywhere. Sthanura, which is state. So it says unalterable in the website, but it also means stationary, firm, or standing up. So these are the ones I got from Sanskrit online dictionary. Achala, which is steady and immutable, unmoving. Avyakto, as in unmanifested, unclear, abstract, primary, invisible, and unevolved. Achintya is inconceivable, incomprehensible, surpassing. Avikaryo is unchangeable, invariable. Anashino, meaning indestructible, which could also again mean eternal. But I think it is used in the, I think in the verse, it is used in the context of non-putrefaction. So it doesn't sort of decay, and aprameyasya, which is immeasurable, unlimited, can't be proved, and infinite.
All right. So we'll go to the last question now. How many ways can soul not be destroyed? Or how many ways can matter be destroyed? Okay, I think we have our answers. I think
Yeah,
many of them got it
everybody's-
right. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is in where he talks about it, Chedyo Chindanti, which is it can't be shred or broken, or weapon cannot kill it. Adahyo Pavaka, which is the fire can't burn it. Kledayanti is cannot be dampened or drowned, and Ashoshya Shoshayati Marutaha, meaning it cannot be dried. I somehow just thought there should be 5, but there are 4 ways. So,
Excellent. So
that's
that
the end
wraps
of
up our
the
quiz. I know we're a little over time as well. So any other final thoughts, Deval, on the?
I don't know. I hope the quiz was interesting.
Yeah. So thank you all for for participating. I think it was. I hope it was as much fun as it was for, I guess, Deval to prepare all this. So thank you all. As we know, we'll be having the next session on the second half of chapter 2 in 3 weeks. So if anybody is interested in participating, please please let me know. And we'll. I know we have a couple of volunteers, but we do need maybe a couple of more. So just let us know. So I'll turn this back to you, Madhu, to any final thoughts, and we can wrap it up.
Sure. So Harish, first I wanted to thank Deval. Extremely well-organized quiz. My God, it's quite difficult also. So at some point, I'm going to blame it was my internet problem. I could not answer some of those. So I had internet problems, but very well organized. Deval. Complicated quiz. I think the advantage of the quiz is you grab a few concepts, few ideas, and new ideas that you can learn. So very, very well conducted quiz. So Harish, thanks for coordinating lots of interactive discussions. So again, it goes on to show that even 1 hour, 1.5 hours just doesn't seem to be enough to have discussion, because there's so much substance and material in all this. So maybe we learn as we go along. Perhaps maybe we break even the bigger chapters into 3 parts rather than 2 parts and have more discussions. So time is at our disposal. So we got, people usually do Bhagavad Gita for 1 or 2 years, right, to understand it. So maybe we'll stretch it and do that. But anyway, thank you so much, Harish, for organizing this, and all the participants. Any other questions or any complimentary comments from others is very welcome at this point, because I think the team has taken enormous effort. I know that they're doing a lot of practice rehearsals and so on. A special mention to Pratibha ji and her daughter. She really, recited those verses so well. So maybe next time we should have the kids to recite verses, because they seem to be reciting much better than any adults that I know of. So doing really a good job. So thank you very much for that. So yeah, any other comments? Please come on the video, please.
I think wonderful effort. Excellent teamwork, and you put a lot of hard work. So it's really amazing, actually, and so much of work has gone behind this.
I think thanks to Harish for all the technological work. I love Prezi. It just keeps
very well organized, Deval and Harish, all of you. Thank you, because I wrote a message and it went to Prajnesh, but sorry, because I'm not good with this. Anyway, it was very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. And it was good to collaborate with with Deval and Pratibha ji and Veena ji. So thank you all, and look forward to collaboration from another team for the next session. So thank you.
So Harish, before we finish, so next week is back to Chandogya Upanishad. the second kanda. So I've had some feedback from last week. I know it was a little bit complicated, so I'm going to stretch it a bit more and spend more time in individual verses. So we'll be pleased to see all of you there again next Sunday for Chandogya. And then after that, we have revision session. So the revision session in 2 weeks time is going to be around creation, because the Chandogya Upanishad second kanda talks about creation. So I think the timing will be very good for us to go back and revise about creation. What is the Shrishti Prakarana, as it's called in Shastras? What is the creation? What is the sequence of creation, and so on? So we want volunteers, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 volunteers who want to do that session, maybe 20 minutes each or 30 minutes each, talk about creation from what we have done several months ago, and also bring in their own thoughts. I think that'll be a best way, as Sudarshan mentioned, to go back and do the revision is important, because sometimes as you keep on going, you forget what you have done. So it's always a good practice to go back and learn what we have potentially forgotten. Okay, so see you next Sunday.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Shall we say home?
Oh yeah, you can say. Please, Deval.
Thank you.
Oh no, Harish will say.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
All right.
You have to
Harish,
say
go on.
Omkar.
Please, Harish.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.